In the battle of the Block S, Syracuse falls to Stanford 26-24 in its second ACC matchup of the season. SU grabbed the lead late in the fourth quarter, but was unable to close the game inside the JMA Wireless Dome tonight. An unreal grab from Stanford wide receiver Alec Manor on 4th and 9 set up the Emmett Kenny game-winning field goal to lift the Cardinal over the Orange. Stick around because Orange Press Pass starts right now. Welcome into CitrusTV studios. Carson Fowler with you, Rahill, Jaiswal, Nick Waley sitting with me at the desk. We'll check in with our reporter Jordan Leonard in a little bit. Fellas, let's address the elephant in the room that was that final drive. Syracuse comes out with the loss. Rahill, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of talk around Fran Brown, mainly because he decided to leave Mayer one-on-one with Clarence Lewis. But Carson, Nick, I like the decision to leave him one-on-one, mainly because Lewis is your best quarterback. Mayer is their best receiver. We're going to put our best athlete on your best athlete. We're going to see what can happen. Clarence Lewis played some actually pretty good coverage. It was just a perfectly thrown ball. Nothing you can do there.
The difference is that Manor is not just a typical wide receiver. He's one of, if not, I would say he's a top 3, top 5 wide receiver in the ACC right now. He's probably the best skill player, actually not probably, is the best skill player on the Stanford team. You had to put him in double coverage there.
Rahill and Nick, you make great points. Syracuse obviously coming out with the loss. Let's take a look at our highlights from tonight's game inside the JMA Wireless Dome. Syracuse taking on the Stanford Cardinal. 2,800 miles separate these two programs. The first play coming here. 8:34 in the third. Ashton Daniels pass intercepted. I'm sorry. That's a run to the left side. Ashton Daniels here takes himself again. Rolling right. Airing it out. Alec Manor with an unreal grab. You had a few of those today.
That's gonna be a SportsCenter top 10 right there, Carson.
OBJ-like. Ashton McDaniels was hot early on, hitting a couple of receivers. They ended up getting a field goal to start the game.
And once again, the running game absolutely killing Syracuse defensively. We saw that in the first 2 games, saw it even more against Stanford.
Syracuse coming up big with a fumble. Devin Grant picks it up. Syracuse goes the other way. Another field goal. That's from Brady Denneberg, 30 yards away. Syracuse on the board. This was Chris Davis Jr., 47-yard run to the Syracuse 33rd yard line for a first down. 51 yards away, Emmett Kenny, he had a big day.
Yeah, 4 made field goals.
Kyle McCord, the next possession. Umari Hatcher gets free, loses his defender, 67 yards for the score. Syracuse gifted that one going to half.
And Amari Hatcher, 3 receptions, over 80 yards receiving. When Arondé Gazin had a really rough day, he stepped up big.
And this one, Clarence Lewis, the Notre Dame transfer, coming away with his first interception of the season. Big one. Then McCord, the next possession, a turnover. It's a pick 6. They'll take this one all the way. Syracuse, next possession. Kyle McCord looking right. Jackson Meeks hauls it in, 16 yards, big first down. McCord, Little League Kyle McCord, as Fran Brown says, takes it himself. 19 yards, what do you guys see from Kyle McCord there?
And that is the first ever rushing touchdown that McCord has had in his entire career. Not just at Ohio State, not just at Syracuse. Shows that he does have the legs, at least a little bit.
And McCord's looked great, throws another interception here. He had a few mistakes in this one. Another field goal from Emmett Kenny, good, 35 yards away. The next possession, Syracuse down 23-17. Darrell Gill gets free. Syracuse, the middle of the field was wide open all day. Rahill.
Yeah, this is at the point in the game where you thought Syracuse was going to take full control and start to maybe step on the gas and eke out with a win, because this was definitely their best drive of the day, Carson.
Another big grab. Jackson Meeks, Georgia transfer, has had sensational catches most of the year. That touchdown grab there. Ashton Daniels connects with Alec Manor. For the most part, Clarence Lewis did a good job covering him today. That one he gets free. Ashton McDaniels, again, looking left. Alec Manor. How many times are we going to say his name tonight? Comes away with a huge grab on 4th down that sets up the game-winning field goal for Stanford. Guys, what do we see from Syracuse?
Tough one if you're a Syracuse fan, but The Orange had their chances, just couldn't get it done at the end of the day, Nick.
I gotta say, especially receiving-wise for Syracuse, many options at 7 total receivers on the day. Trevor Pena, 10 receptions, over 100 yards. Kyle McCord didn't have a bad day, but those 2 picks really cost Syracuse in the end.
We'll check in with our reporter in the Dome. That's Jordan Leonard. Jordan, you had it all going down for you in the press box. Jordan, 17 rush attempts for 26 yards. Syracuse never able to establish the ground attack in this one. How much was SU's inability to run the football a factor in the loss?
Yeah, Carson, I mean, you just said it right there. They had 26 rushing yards. You cannot win a game in the ACC with just 26 rushing yards. It was the biggest factor and the reason why Syracuse lost this game. After the game, head coach Fran Brown said that they need to be multi-dimensional on offense. If you don't run the ball, it doesn't set up the pass. You saw it throughout the game. Arondé Gadsden really being double-teamed and Stanford playing a lot of coverage. That was because Syracuse never really established the run. They never really gave it a shot, and the offensive line wasn't run blocking that well. That was really the biggest reason why Syracuse lost this game. They couldn't establish the run.
Hey, Jordan, Kyle McCord had his ups and downs, but in the end, 2 interceptions. So how much does he deserve for the loss? How much blame are you giving him, considering he had the 2 interceptions today?
Yeah, Rahill, this is a tough one because you just mentioned it. He had 2 touchdowns. He had over 300 yards passing. He had the 2 interceptions. That Dan Villari one that was returned for a touchdown, I don't know how much that is on him, more of a miscommunication, but that second one was a horrible pass. It's hard to say because Kyle McCord is really the heart blood of this offense, but if you look at this game, the reason Syracuse lost is the offense did not take advantage of the opportunities. They had a number of chances where they had the ball with a chance to go ahead. They ended up taking the lead at the end, and Stanford came and scored, but the defense was really the reason that SU was stayed in this game. So if you're looking at the offensive side, the biggest culprit had to be Kyle McCord, and the offense was the biggest reason why Syracuse lost this contest.
Hey Jordan, it's Nick. Obviously, it's very easy to look at the negatives from this game. It didn't go Syracuse's way, but SU were able to fight back from being behind for most of the game going into the 4th quarter. What positives can the Orange take from this game?
I will give you credit, Nick. Thinking of the positives after the game is really tough because this is a game Syracuse should have won. They were 8.5 points favorites coming into the game. You know, I have to say that being the Beat the Bookie executive producer. This is a game Syracuse needed to win. You're 2-0. You just came off a ranked win against Georgia Tech. Stanford is a solid team, but they were ranked last in the ACC preseason poll. I got no positives for you. I give you credit for trying to think of some, but there are no positives. Kyle McCord said that after the game that, you know, you just got to go to the doctor, get it fixed, look at the film, and really correct this stuff. There are some positives that you can take away from individual plays, but not really any general positives you can take away from the Syracuse loss.
Jordan, we appreciate your report. Safe travels back home, brother. When we come back, we'll discuss what this loss means for SU going forward, the trouble in the trenches, our OPP, player of the game, and more. Orange Press Pass returns after the break. Welcome back to Orange Press Pass. Carson, Fowler with you. Rahill, Jaiswal, Nick Waley with you as well. If you're tuning in just now, Syracuse fell to Stanford in a heartbreaker, 26-24. Head coach Fran Brown said post-game, there's a lot to take away from this one, and that makes for a perfect segue into our First area of discussion, guys, what are we taking away from this game? How much of this game was a character-building game for Syracuse?
Well,
Rahill.
I mean, this is where the rubber meets the road if you're Syracuse. This is the first real gut punch they're going to have this season. Remember, Syracuse was talking a lot of smack after they beat Georgia Tech. Fran Brown saying, hey, I took it personal when you questioned your toughness. What is Syracuse going to do now, Nick? This is the first time they've had a little adversity this season. The chips are down. How are they going to respond? It's going to be a big test for them.
I mean, obviously the next game is against Holy Cross, so there's a little bit of an easier opponent for Syracuse to absolutely beat up on. But this is the first time, like you mentioned, Rahill, that this team has faced adversity. It's only Fran Brown's third game as a head coach. It's a team that's sort of been mishmashed together. Obviously, there's a lot of great talent. Ronde Gadsden, Trevor Pena, Kyle McCord, obviously. But there was still going to be growing pains. We're only 3 games in. There's 9 games left. This game will not define Syracuse this season, I promise you that.
Syracuse held scoreless in the first quarter and did not lead in this game until 3 minutes left in the fourth. Let's talk about SU's slow start. Nick, let's go to you first.
Look, I think having that bye week did not help Syracuse in any way. It was obvious from the jump that it just seemed like the Cardinals, they just wanted it more. Obviously, touchdown for Stanford in the first half. Syracuse only had 4 minutes of possession going into the second. Syracuse only had 27 total yards, or negative 13 net rushing yards. Syracuse just looked like they just didn't wake up for this one.
You know, Nick, it's not actually surprising Syracuse has started off bad. Syracuse this season hasn't put together 4 solid quarters of football, if we're being honest. They really struggled out of the gates at Ohio. Against Ohio, were able to get away with it. And against Georgia Tech, they beat them up for 3 quarters, and then it got really close in the fourth. And it was all self mistakes. So it's not really surprising to see Syracuse start out slow because they haven't put together 4 quarters all season long.
Syracuse came out slow against Ohio, obviously a much worse team than the Stanford team. They came out with a W in this one. Didn't quite get there tonight against Stanford. Can't come out flat against ACC opponents when they're good teams going forward. We discussed the inability to run the football earlier in the show with Jordan. Stanford, 4 sacks and 7 tackles for loss. Fran Brown complimented the offensive line on Monday, but they looked completely out of the sorts in this one. Rahill, what did you see from the offensive line?
You know how Fran Brown was saying Northeast toughness? I'm having some issues seeing the toughness right now, Carson, because Syracuse was absolutely dominated in the trenches. Remember when Fran Brown came in as a recruiter, one of his main focuses was, hey, let's beef up that offensive line. Remember, Nick, last year, the offensive line was a huge issue because they'd be overpowered. And again, through the first 3 games, it's looking eerily similar. Kyle McCord had absolutely no time to throw back there, and that's part of the reason why he started off so sluggish.
And it also, I feel like, makes McCord's game look worse than it actually was. The two picks obviously did not help in the slightest. Like we mentioned, it probably did cost Syracuse the game in the end. But McCord threw for nearly 340 yards once again. Obviously sacked 4 times, but there were so many times where he was barely given 2 seconds. Some of the snaps were poor as well to just start the play. I think this is just a little bit more eye-opening in terms of how the O-line is for Syracuse.
Yeah, 46 pass plays. LaQuint Allen not getting involved as much as I think he should. A very dominant offensive player, can run and catch the ball. So would like to see him more. Only 1.5 yards of average rush on this game. Something good SU can take away from this one, though, some definitive improvements on defense, despite a few absences, including no Deion Tank Wilson on the defensive line, obviously no Marlo Wax either, injury against Ohio. What did you guys like from the Orange defense tonight, though?
I mean, I just like that they were just improving throughout the game. There was still so many occasions last year as well, and even to start this season against Ohio, it seemed like there was just teething troubles. The edge rush defense simply just wasn't there. Again, the rushing defense wasn't great, but I thought the secondary, obviously we talked about the final drive. There was obviously a little bit of an issue there, but other than that, the 2 picks for Lewis and Grant were great and actually kept Syracuse in the game and actually gave the Orange a chance to win towards the end. But in the end, obviously, the offense didn't back it up.
Yeah, Nick, the defense was the only reason Syracuse was still in that game toward the end. I thought they did enough, especially in the second half, to hold Stanford to a couple of field goals when they were in really good positions. When you have an offense with Kyle McCord, LaQuint Allen, Ronde Gadsden, Trevor Pena, you expect Syracuse to come out with a win. I thought the defense did enough in that second half. That's where you need the offense to pick up the defense and take advantage of the opportunities.
And we'd be remiss if we didn't name our OPP player of the game. It's none other than Ao Manor. 7 receptions, 87 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Ao Manor made a few OBJ-like catches in this game, including the grab on 4th and 9 that set up that Stanford game-winning field goal. Props to the sophomore for a great game. No debate whether he's our Orange Press player of the game. Press pass player of the game, rather. After this, our OPP group gives our thoughts on Syracuse football after the loss. Was the bye week bad, and whether SU lost this game or really Stanford won? Orange Press Pass back in a few minutes.
Women are bad with money.
It's what the world's been saying for centuries. But now,
we've got something to say.
Save it. Save the old-fashioned advice, the empty excuses. It's all worthless, unlike us.
To our fellow females, it is time to save ourselves by saving our money.
Contributing to our futures, investing in our independence.
Until we're no longer
80% more likely than men to live in poverty in retirement.
So again, we say to that, save it.
The falsehoods, the feelings of fault, then the funds.
Learn how to save for your retirement at wesaysaveit.org.
Another warm welcome back to Orange Press Pass. Carson, Fowler, Rahill, Jaiswal, Nick Waley with you again. So many different emotions felt throughout this game, fellas. Some ups, some downs. How much confidence do we have in this Syracuse football program after this one?
You know, this is a tough one to swallow, but I'm going to say, for those people who thought there was a chance that Syracuse football was going to the college football playoff, it's done. This loss completely eliminated any chance of getting in the playoffs, Nick. I know Stanford played well, but come on, you lose to a team that you should beat when you're 9-point favorites at home? College football playoffs done. Chalk it up.
Please tell me somebody who actually thought that Syracuse was going to make the college football playoff.
There were a couple times.
Even the
they got some AP top 25 votes.
Yes, but that doesn't mean they're going to make the college football
with
playoff.
an easier schedule. It's not this year would be easier.
It's not the end of the world. This is a game that's not going to define Syracuse's season. I think it stings. It absolutely does. Syracuse should have certainly won it down the stretch. But look, there's still 9 games to go, and there's some big ACC games coming up that could help Syracuse in the long run.
Yeah, this one had trap game all over it. Stanford, one of the worst defenses in college football last year, didn't do a lot in the transfer portal to fix those issues. Fellas, 13 days between this game and the Georgia Tech game on September 7th. Bye week bad for the Orange? You mentioned that it was, or just bad luck?
No, I'm still going to stick with that it was a bad thing for the Orange. Look, it just looked like Syracuse couldn't just get things going, especially offensively. We saw in the first half, McCord just looked sluggish. The offensive line looked very sluggish in general. The running game was non-existent, and I think a lot of that is to do with that bye week. You come off a game against Georgia Tech, which, yes, it did look a lot closer than it did, but there was a lot of confidence. There's a lot of positives to come from that game. Stopping the run defense of Georgia Tech, which seemed to be something that Syracuse could certainly build on in the coming weeks. But then again, Stanford rushed for nearly 175 rushing yards today. Again, the same issues springing up again for the Orange, and that worries me for sure.
Yeah, this is definitely a yes, Carson. This was, I don't want to say as worse as it could get out of a bye week, but this is looking eerily similar to the Dino Babers era, where Syracuse was awful coming out of the bye weeks, and I actually thought this would be a little bit more helpful because, Georgia Tech is such an emotional win. You have a week to regroup, but they just didn't carry over any of that offensive prowess. Remember, the offense in the first half of that game was unbelievable. We did not see any of that tonight.
A couple injuries as well. You'd think that the bye week would help your guys get healthy. No Yazid Haynes, no Justice Ross Simmons, who's been out for a little while. And like I mentioned earlier, no Deion Tank Wilson, a huge part of that Syracuse defensive line. So not really understanding that bye week. Definitely bad for the Orange this week. SU with a few turnovers in this game as well, including that pick 6, 7 penalties. How much of this loss is on Syracuse, and how much credit does Stanford deserve for this win? Rahill, go to you first.
This is going to be a little surprising for me, considering I've been pretty harsh on Syracuse. But I think Stanford won this game. You got to give Stanford a lot of credit, Nick. Their first ever ACC game. They're going up against a Syracuse team who just took down Georgia Tech Friday night in the JMA Wireless Dome. They make the cross-country trip. They really played a really tough physical game. They out-physicaled Syracuse, which, according to Fran Brown, he was going to make sure it didn't happen. And Stanford did exactly that. Won the trenches on both sides of the ball, made the big plays. We're more disciplined in the bigger areas. You got to give a lot of credit to Stanford. While this is not a good look for Syracuse at all, Stanford won this game. They took it from Syracuse.
Are you a betting man, Rahill?
I am not actually.
You dabble?
I
Okay, well, let me tell you something that you'll know. Syracuse were 9.5-point favorites heading into this game. Syracuse should have won this game. They had the chance.
Stanford took it from them.
But Syracuse should have won this game. They were the better team going into it. They had one of the best offenses on paper going into this game. Obviously, we could look at against Ohio and Georgia Tech, but McCord was, well, it's a bit blunt now, but he was a dark horse for the Heisman. He was ranked in the top 6 for a bunch of people. So looking at it that way, I think Syracuse was bad. They let the game slip away for them, and I know I mentioned it. It's not the end of the world, but it's an opportunity to bounce back in the next ACC games.
Nick, I'm with you, man. Syracuse kept Stanford.
So we're not going to give Stanford any credit.
I'm going to give him some credit.
Okay.
I would say I'll give him credit in the first quarter. The next 3 quarters, I think Syracuse gave them that ball game. 4 field goals and a pick 6. Syracuse defense did a really good job keeping the offense in this game. Surprise. Look at that. Look at the time of possession. Stanford had the ball most of the game, mostly due because of how they attacked the run game. Syracuse defensive line, obviously, without some of its key players.
But it's like you mentioned, Syracuse didn't lead until the late stages of the fourth quarter. Syracuse were behind for most of this game and then took the lead in crunch time.
Actually, miraculous they were in this game for how long.
Exactly.
Yes, they were. But again, you have to give credit to Stanford because when you're coming into a loud environment like the JMA Wireless Dome, it's easy to be flustered. It's easy to commit penalties. They were the more solid team. So for all that Syracuse didn't play their best football, obviously they didn't play their best football, but I think Stanford did a great job wrestling it away because we've seen underdogs come into environments like that, have chances to win a game, and they don't get it done. Stanford took all their chances. Give them credit.
I will say, I have a cool stat for you.
Let's hear it.
Stanford have won 13 of the last 17 games where they played on the West Coast, and they've won, I believe, now 7 in a row against ACC opponents.
So by definition, this was just a penciled-in loss for Syracuse.
Maybe we didn't look into it deep enough.
Yeah.
Maybe. When we come back, we'll take a look at the updated ACC standings, plus some of the best college football games coming up, and a preview of our next OPP. Stay with us.
Precise, no margin for error.
Dare to forget that. Dare to have fun with it. Get weird with it. Dare to send those old STEM theories flying past the neighbor's house into outer space. Dare to program something internet-breaking, record-breaking. Dare to blow their minds. Dare to learn the difference between sedimentary and metamorphic rock. Go find those rocks. Dare to keep daring. Dare to STEM. Check out She Can STEM to get started.
A final orange press pass. Welcome back to our CitrusTV studio. Carson Fowler again, Rahill, Jaiswal, Nick Waley with you. Syracuse 2-1 now this season after a 26-24 loss in the Dome against that Stanford Cardinal. Let's get an updated look at our ACC standings after this one. Full screen up ahead. Virginia now sits atop the standings. Our Syracuse's rival number 2, Boston College. What else do you guys like in the standings?
The rivaling quotations right there.
These standings are something else. If someone told me that Virginia and Boston College would be sitting atop the ACC, I don't know what I would have said. But now, granted, a lot of those teams haven't played games yet. But I mean, the fact that Boston College is even a top 25 team, Crazy.
I mean, the only interesting thing is that the one team that's not on that list right now is FSU. I mean, obviously, they haven't played in the ACC yet. Play their first game against Cal tomorrow. Could be 4-0 by this time tomorrow.
Yeah, it's with confidence that I'm still a little confused seeing Cal and SMU and Stanford up there. Hasn't really felt right yet.
Just looks weird.
Let's look at some of our NCAA games coming up tomorrow, or I guess rather today. NC State, Clemson, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Miami going to South Florida. A couple other great games. What do you like, Rahill?
Yeah, I'm looking at that Clemson and NC State game. That's going to be a really interesting ACC squad. Remember, Clemson got the brakes beat off them against Georgia early in the season. They've rebounded pretty nicely. NC State's always a relatively physical team. Remember, they came into the season ranked top 25. That's going to be really interesting. Also, Syracuse has got NC State in 2 weeks.
That's right.
That'll be a good preview.
In Raleigh.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think we're talking about those ACC games that are going to be crucial down the stretch. I got to say, Miami looked like the team to beat in the ACC. I think Cam Ward looks like an early favorite for the Heisman. Absolutely. And I think that Miami defense looks great. They actually beat UF absolutely to shreds down in the swamp. But can South Florida pull off the upset? Their Barstool account appears to think that they could. That could be an interesting matchup. But of course, Boomer Sooner against the Vols. That could be interesting too.
In a top 25 matchup in the Big 12, Damian Alford, former Syracuse wide receiver at Utah, taking on number 14 Oklahoma State. A lot of good college football tomorrow, fellas. I'll be on the couch 100%.
Absolutely.
Next OPP will be against Holy Cross. That's Parents Weekend. Cuse Athletics saying the game is sold out.
How about that? Holy Cross, of all the games to be sold out this year, Holy Cross. But no, Nick, we talked about it before. This should be a Holy Cross game where it's a get-right game. You get all your frustration out after this one. What I'm looking for is that UNLV game, because that's another game, Carson, that screams trap. 9 p.m. game,
all over it.
Kickoff from Las Vegas. That's what I'm going to be looking at.
Well, I know our sports director, Adam Cohen, is absolutely thrilled to be going to Las Vegas to be covering that game, but I'm looking at those 3 straight games on the road. That is not an easy slate by any stretch of the imagination. We've already mentioned NC State, and a Pitt team that
on a
Thursday night in Pittsburgh. That one will be far from easy.
Syracuse has never won at Acrisure Stadium.
Wow. I mean, that's a stat in itself. Look, I think those are the games that are really going to define Syracuse this season. This is a Stanford result that, look, it's definitely tough, but look, go start looking ahead.
It puts Syracuse a little bit behind the 8 ball, but something to build on, like we mentioned earlier in the show, and a lot of opportunities ahead on a relatively easy schedule for Syracuse to pick up some quality wins in the ACC. Final thoughts here, Rahill. What are you taking away from this Syracuse 26-24
Yeah, the
loss?
rubber has met the road officially. I talked about it earlier. Syracuse did a lot of trash talking after their Georgia Tech win. You get a little bit of humble pie here against Stanford, a game you should have won. What do you do? How do you respond? Fran Brown, he talks a lot of motivational game. We're going to see if it really works out.
Look, I know you've been Mr. Negative today, Rahill. You're normally the most positive and happy person I've ever seen, but I'm going to be the little bit more positive one. Look, there's 9 games to go, and got a Holy Cross game next week. Like you mentioned, that's going to be a little bit of a let's just beat up the little sibling and just to make ourselves feel better. But then it's going to be about those games. NC State on the road at UNLV, a team that looks unbelievable to start the season, and then of course Pitt on the road as well. Those are the games where Syracuse is going to prove whether this Syracuse team and Fran Brown are serious or not. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, my final thought in this one, again, need to see more of LaQuint Allen. Let the monster loose. Had a 1,000-yard rushing season last year. Can do the same under an offensive line that is supposed to be pretty decent on paper. A lot of weapons that's going to spread out this offense. Keep going to LaQuint Allen. Need to establish some sort of run game. Obviously, Syracuse did not have it today. I think that's going to pretty much do it. On our next Orange Press Pass, Holy Cross 1-2, Syracuse Orange 2-1. Fellas, I don't think this one's going to be
This should be over by halftime. And it is Parents Weekend, so
absolutely
should be fun.
Look, I think that the ideal situation for Syracuse is that the fourth quarter gets shortened to 10 minutes.
Similar to Wagner a couple of years ago.
That's what I'm looking at for this game.
100%. Parents Weekend next weekend. I think that's going to do it tonight on OPP. Quick shout out to two of my buddies, Andrew DeAngelis and Peter Tompkins, hyping me up for my first sports hosting show. From our executive producer, Rahill, my two analysts, Rahill Jaiswal, Nick Waley, and our entire production team, I'm Carson Fowler saying so long and have a great night, Syracuse.